everyone. May I ask that all participants please use their microphones when you're speaking at the meeting, as the meeting is being webcast. Okay, thank you. If we could start with the first item on the agenda, which is the appointment of the Vice Chair for 2025 and 2026. Does anyone have any nominations for the appointment of Vice Chair?
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Councillor Clements.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
I'm happy to second that.
Okay. And are there any other nominations? No. So can I ask who's for? Against? Anyone abstaining? No. Then the motion is carried, and I will now pass across to the Vice Chair.
Thanks, Rosalind. Yeah, thanks everyone. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We do indeed. We have apologies from Councillor Vicky Burt and Councillor Patricia Furness, and Councillor Rachel Carter is substituting for Councillor Vicky Burt.
Fantastic, thank you. We also have the minutes from the meeting held on the 28th of January. Are we content to sign the minutes? Any you proposing? Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to give my apologies for that meeting. I didn't turn up because of an IT glitch. I got a new phone which managed to wipe my calendar, and the meeting vanished, and I didn't realise I'd missed it until after the event. So I just wanted to apologise to the committee.
Apologies accepted, definitely. No other comments? Someone to propose? Tony? Seconder?
Happy to second.
Fantastic. Show of hands then. In favour? Yep. Anyone against? And abstaining? Lovely. Carried. I don't have any announcements. I don't believe Vicky had any announcements. So other than do remember your microphones as always. Otherwise, we will move on to declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No, we are making rapid progress. In which case, agenda item 6 is the standards update, which I think, James, you will speak to. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and congratulations on your appointment today. This report will be familiar to members of this committee. This comes to every committee, every standards committee meeting that we have. The idea behind it is to keep the idea of standards and how the standards are being dealt with at the forefront of members' minds. You will see that it is also contained within the Constitution that it should come to this committee on a regular basis. You will also be familiar with this committee, with this report, that normally when we bring it here, there are usually around, I would say, approximately 6 or 7 issues on the report. However, for the last 6 months, everybody has been impeccably behaved by the looks of it. Either that or people are less inclined to complain. I couldn't possibly comment which one it is, but there's literally been only 1 complaint in the whole of 2025 so far. There was no breach found there either. I did investigate it and consulted with the independent person in coming to the decision that we did, that there was no case to answer, and that is it. So well done, all members of East Hart and all the parishes and towns. I think more of that. I say I'm very happy from the monitoring officer perspective. But yeah, as I say, I've even checked the monitoring officer mailbox just before I came through, just in case there had been something coming, but no, still nothing. So yeah, very short report. Nothing really to draw your attention to. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, further. Councillor Possible.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the report. And yes, great to see that everyone is on their best behaviour at the moment. I think at the meeting that we held in July last year, I think we'd agreed that where possible, we would include on the report going forward who had made the complaint, so whether it was a complaint from a resident or a parish council or a district councillor, just to give us context as to who, what behaviour might have been involved. And I think it was agreed to that would be the case for as long as it didn't disclose kind of information that would otherwise allow us to identify that person. So if we could have that going forward, I think that'd be useful.
Yeah, apologies. I can't recall that big coming forward. I do recall it being asked that we do, because previously we used to not include reports that had been withdrawn, and it was asked that they be put on there. I can't remember that one, but I will do that going forward, and apologies for not including it this time. I'm happy to verbally give you a bit more information on this. So this complaint came in against a district councillor from a member of the public. So it wasn't councillor or anything like that, but as there's only the one on this occasion, I can quite easily tell you that verbally.
Any others? We have a short meeting. The only question I had on that is we are sort of a couple of years into this round and had a decent turnover of councillors last time. I was wondering if you've kind of been around long enough to have a sense of are we generally better behaved? Do you think that the would members benefit from some more training on the standards? Looks like the answer.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly comment on previous councillors and where everyone sits, in a league table. I think it does speak for itself that in the last 6 months. I mean, I've been at East Harts now for just over 5.5 years, and in the time that I've been bringing this report, I've not had one where there's been so few complaints. So it is good to see. To the point where I'm even checking to make sure that the mailbox is still working, just in case that's the reason. But it is working. Everything's fine. But it is really good from my perspective that complaints are so low. And as I say, members coming to this committee will be familiar with some of the complaints that we get are very low level anyway. But even they have seemingly kind of dropped away. Again, what the reason for that is, I don't know. All I can say is, more of this, please, from my perspective.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for this report. I was just going to ask. I mean, the way the Standards Committee works is there's a background of legislation to that. So I'm just thinking about when there's a unitary authority, will it be the same sort of process? Will there be any? Would you anticipate any differences, or how might it work in the future?
So if the unitary was set up tomorrow and we went straight across, then yeah, it would be the same. So that it's the same rules that govern district councils as it is with unitary authorities. However, I do understand that the new government or newish government in Westminster is looking at changing the standards regime. I attended the local government conference in Harrogate last year, at which Angela Rayner MP was present, and she gave a speech to indicate that they are looking to make changes in the area of standards, particularly around what we can offer as repercussions to complaints that are upheld, because currently the strongest sanction that we've got is censure, which is not particularly strong, and that is applicable no matter how egregious the breach is. So I think central governments are looking at implementing such. Well, I will invite Nicholas to speak in a moment, because he is a little bit closer to this than I am, but they are looking at suspensions and exclusion from committees and the like. I will hand over to Nicholas, who is actually involved in that work that's happening in central government.
Yeah, well, I touched on some of the points at the last meeting, but just picking up on what James has said, as you may know, before 2011, or 2007, I think it was, there was a mandatory common code across the country. In 2011, the Localism Act changed that, which allowed councils, you had to have a code, but it could be, you could choose which code you wanted. But I think the government now is minded to go back to having a single mandatory code, which I think is a good idea. So that's one change that's imminent. The other, picking up again on what James has just said, is the issue of sanctions. I think they're looking at introducing suspension under certain circumstances, and also possibly, or this is more contentious, disqualification. And a couple of meetings I've attended where it's been discussed, and certainly from my independent person point of view, I think disqualification would be, if someone's found to have breached the code of conduct, that would be a possible sanction. And I think it's a fine line to be drawn between ensuring the public has some sort of demonstrable redress, balancing that against the care that must be taken not to interfere with democratic mandate. Because if you're elected by people that they trust you to represent them, if they don't like you, they don't vote for you. And I think it's a fine line between maintaining that direct connection against having a body, a judicial, quasi-judicial body, it would have to be, or some sort of body that would make these determinations that could disqualify somebody from being a councillor outside the election cycle. So this hasn't been resolved yet, but I mean, these are some of the discussions that are going on and some of the complexities involved. And of course, at the moment, as you'll be aware also, legislation can preclude you from being a councillor. If you're a serving councillor and you're convicted of an offence which carries a prison sentence, is it 3 months, you can be disqualified. And if you've got certain convictions that would preclude you from being a candidate, they're looking at tidying all that up as well. So there's quite a lot, I think, that will happen. But of course, from my point of view as an independent person, I'm very conscious that the public has a right to expect the highest standards from those whom it entrusts with their interests in the local authority. And it's right, there's some sort of redress available to them. But equally, the code procedure isn't designed to hobble you from doing what you need to do. You're elected to represent people and you will have views to express. It's absolutely right. You shouldn't be prohibited from doing that or prevented from doing that or made to feel it's difficult to do that. And certainly my understanding is the process wouldn't be designed to interfere with that, merely to make certain that when you're doing what you do on behalf of the public, you do it to a high standard. So one of the things, just very quickly, and I'll shut up. One of the things that certainly has struck me, notwithstanding the impeccable behaviour on this authority, is that the declaration of office that you sign when you take up when you're elected requires you to use your best endeavours and apply your mind in a fair and appropriate way. Or I've forgotten the precise wording of it, but it doesn't require you to observe high standards of conduct. And it may come to nothing, but certainly I've had a discussion with officials suggesting they might want to look at just tightening up the declaration of office, just a whisker, just to incorporate an expectation of high standards alongside an expectation which you currently sign that would use your best endeavours in your role as a councillor. But, you know, we're waiting to see what happens. The consultation took place closed at the end of February, I think. So no doubt the council responded and some of you may have responded. So I think all this is yet to be revealed and exactly what they're going to be doing.
Thank you. Do you have any idea of the sort of timescale for that work, or
Imminently, that's an ambiguous response. I think it's because it closed in February. These things they had about 2,000 responses, I think. So it's an awful lot to go through, and then they've got to sift all the responses and then work out what their position is. So it won't be. I guess it'll be after the summer break, I would imagine. I mean, I don't know. I'm just surmising.
I think it's a little bit how long's a piece of string with these things. I think when that started, I think LGR was a bit further away. So I think competing priorities might elongate how long we can wait for that. I think another aspect to add to what Nicholas was saying there as well. I think we've covered this before at this committee about the concept that in order to be able, before you can breach the code of conduct, members have to be acting in their capacity as a councillor at the time when the act complained of takes place. I think it's been summarised as, you know, a councillor is not a councillor 24 hours a day. There are periods when they are the individual as well, and therefore if they behave in a certain way when they're an individual, then they are not caught by the code of conduct. I think the area around that might need to be tightened as well, because currently there have been instances when a well-known person who is known in the community to be a councillor will act in a particular way, but it still isn't caught by the code, which doesn't feel right. So I think you've also worked on that as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I forgot that. That's a really important point, actually, because there's a section 28 of the Localism Act, which, well, 27, 28, if you look at it, when you've got and in a sort of insomniac moment, you will see it uses the term in that capacity, which is what James has just said. It's never been tested in law, but certainly a number of the complaints that James and I have looked at have involved, some time ago now, some members doing things in a private capacity, but being known to be local authority members, but because they weren't doing it in their capacity as councillors, then nothing. It's a very common problem because it's not just in this area, but across the country where, and it's a fine line because there is case law before the Localism Act, which acknowledged that people weren't councillors 24/7 and had to have a private life. This goes back, if you recall, remember the Livingston case in 2005, which was the seminal moment in this, where I think he made some offensive remark to a journalist who complained. And I think it went to the High Court eventually, who determined that what he had said, albeit it was something that was inappropriate and offensive, he didn't say it in his capacity as then mayor of London, and nothing happened. And the incapacity threshold, in a sense, perpetuates, which is my personal view, and James will correct me if I'm wrong, perpetuates that distinction, which is, I can it's a very finely balanced argument, because yes, you're not councillors 24/7, you are only councillors for part of your lives, other things to be doing. And it's right, the law doesn't constrain you by having you obliged to behave yourselves 24/7. That said, there are certain circumstances when, as a member of as a leader in your community, the public, the electors, such as myself, have an expectation that those whom we entrust to do this job will conduct themselves to a decent standard of probity and integrity. It's a very fine, complicated balance to maintain. But as James has said, he's right, they are looking to tighten it up. I don't know, I haven't seen what they're going to do, but they're looking to tighten it up a little bit, just to reinforce an expectation that people can't trade off their public image as a local authority member to say things that they couldn't say or shouldn't say if they're in capacity. Are you with me? Yeah, it's a very fine line. Is that about that? Yeah. It's a very fine line.
Thank you, Nicholas. Yes, Councillor. So.
That's very interesting. Thanks, Nicholas. I mean, I always come back to this. It's not really often the councillors that have to be aware of where they are acting as a councillor or a private individual. It's actually the members of the public.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. I mean, in the village where I live, which is part of my ward, I mean, they do expect me to be there.
Well, because you said this, and that stuck in my mind actually. Tony,
good.
Because you did say that people, your electors or your people living around you know you're a councillor, and they don't draw a distinction between you doing council business and you talking to them in the street.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult in the village, I think. Maybe easier in a town, but in a village, it's quite difficult. But it needs to tighten up, I agree. But the other point I can make about the lack of complaints we've had, maybe your idea of trying to push these back to parish councils and towns councils has actually made a difference. It's just an observation.
Yeah, that could well be behind some of this, because in case members don't remember, but I changed the code of conduct a while ago now, probably about a year ago, maybe even more, where we introduced a new part to the complaints procedure, which was local resolution, because we were finding that a lot of complaints were coming to me directly as a monitoring officer, correctly, because that's the route that we have. And then when I was receiving them and I was looking into them, there were a few occasions, not all of them, but there were a few occasions that you could tell that had they sat around and had a conversation, maybe at the parish council or at the town council, then they probably could have been resolved at that point. And we have pushed some back previously, not this time because we've not received them, but we pushed some back and said, look, have you attempted a local resolution on this complaint? And they would say no. So can you at least try to have that first? And if it's not successful, come back to us and we can look at it again. And on some of those occasions, they were resolved locally. So you are correct. That might, with more parish councils being aware of that, they may well have kind of just decided to do that off their own backs before bringing it forward, and it might have been resolved. So that might be part of the answer. You're correct, which is positive, really, because I think a lot of these things can be resolved just through conversation. And I think the minute you go down the complaint, it becomes quite adversarial, and it can often make things a little bit more bitter and a bit more protracted because people are sort of, they've got their fists up all of a sudden. So I think that local conversation thing is probably very beneficial anyway, just in trying to get people to talk to each other. So yeah, hopefully that is part of it, but I couldn't possibly tell you because we're not getting the complaints.
If I can come back on that, there was a complaint we had just before you joined us actually, and it was a parish council, and the parish councillor was there was a complaint from the clerk to two members of the council, and one of them actually, it dropped, you see, and I tried to explain to him. He said my solicitor was that good, he got it stopped, and it wasn't. It's because he resigned from the parish council, and I tried to explain that, and he's obviously spent a lot of money on his solicitor, and he was quite upset when I said that to him. But I thought I ought to say it. But people's perception is quite different,
I just add just one, just picking
Go
up
ahead.
again on what you were saying earlier on. It's almost uniquely, if one can say that term, in this county, of the 10 districts and boroughs, this authority and North Herts are unusual in having a huge number of parishes. You've got about 40 odd parishes, and North Herts is just a tad short of 40. And the parishes traditionally are the source of most of the, by definition of course of numbers, are the source of most of the complaints. Most districts, Stevenage has got none, St Albans has got half a dozen. I think the most, about 10 or a dozen, is it Dacorum or, yeah, I mean, so most of them have very few or none or no parishes. And the parishes, as James has explained, are the source of most complaints. So the fact you've got so few, i.e. just one, is remarkable. Yes. Good.
I would say actually that every village, and I include the four I'm responsible for, have their Mr. Angry. And it's true. And that's where some of it comes from. And it becomes very intense in the villages because it's just a small community and it's so important to them, and they get very sort of, extreme about it sometimes, and it really isn't very important. They can settle it by talking.
Any other comments? No. Right, well, that's easy. The recommendation is page 16 of the agenda pack, which is that the committee receive the report and provide any observations to the Director of Legal Policy and Governance and the Monitoring Officer. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Angus. And seconder, Councillor. Can we have a show of hands to indicate whether you're in favour? Good. Anyone? Yeah, against and abstaining. Nope. All right. In that case, that is carried. There are no urgent items, and so that includes tonight's meeting at. Is it a record? Probably not. 7:23. Thanks, everyone.